Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Venugopal Prabhu, are we ready? When we can start, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, this is the ID, no, Prabhuji. I given co-host rights. Oh, sorry. I think I gave the. Hare Krishna devotees, Dandavat Pranam. Welcome to Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We are fortunate to have the association of His Grace Venugopal Prabhu, who will be sharing the nectar from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, chapter number 25, sloka number 38 to 41. Prabhuji will be sharing the nectar from these 4 slokas. Over to you, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna devotees. Thank you so much, Shankar Shanpriya Prabhu. So we'll start with Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanam-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhaktinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatripatamahu Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Om Tatsat. Hare Krishna dear devotees, welcome to this morning's Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Sangha. So please accept my humble obeisances. Mancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyayo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So I thank all the organizers, particularly Sri Prabhu, for giving me this opportunity for studying Srimad Bhagavatam and also preparing for this class through that very enlivening experience. So thank you. So I seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas to be able to speak in line with Guru Sadhu and Shastra and also within my own realizations. Thank you. Hare Krishna. To start today's verse, we have 4 verses for today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the first verse is a verse Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, verse 38. So achiradeva rajarshe syadachyuta katashrayah shrunvata shraddadhanasya nityada shradadiyataha. Word-to-word translation. That achirat, very soon, eva, certainly, rajarshe, O best of kings, Shya becomes Achyuta of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Katha, narrations, Ashraya, depending on, Srinvataha, of one who is hearing, Shraddadhanasya, faithful, Nityada, always, Syat becomes Adiyataha, by cultivation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. O best of kings, one who is faithful, who is always hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness and in hearing of the Lord's activities, very soon becomes eligible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Purport: constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of Vasudeva means constantly hearing the glories of the Lord. The principles of Bhakti, Yoga, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam are the only means by which perfection can be attained. Simply by hearing of the glories of the Lord, one is elevated to a transcendental position. So we have 3 more verses, so we'll discuss verse by verse. So coming to today's first verse, before that, we have been hearing about Narada's extended preaching session with King Prachina Varishat, and where King Prachina Varishat, in the beginning of this chapter, mentions that the allegory is fine, but it's not so easy to understand. And then Narada Muni is giving, the message as is in this chapter. So the actual glories of devotional service to Achyuta, Krishna, without any beating around the bush, exactly what it means to serve the Supreme Lord and be engaged in constantly serving Him is described in this chapter. In the previous verses, we saw, I think, yesterday's verse also was about the importance of constantly being engaged. So we saw about, there was mention about the artha or real interest. There was some discussion about what is real interest. So Prabhupada mentioned real interest of an individual is to get out of nations. What is that nations? Anything that the what makes one stay in this world of repeated birth and death. That is nations. So any activities that result in repeated birth and death is described by Prabhupada as nations. And what one helps one get out of that is the real interest. That's what we heard in the previous chapter, and there was a lot of elaboration on the on how to do that by engaging in devotional service. So there is now with special focus on the self-interest or real interest of the individual. So we also hear about this interest. It's very interesting to see how when we see interest, there is always people today there is so many other understanding of interest, simple interest, compound interest, because we are so much engrossed in these type of terminologies that really appeal to us. But here we heard yesterday about real interest, and also Prahlad Maharaj mentions about interest in his teachings as well, where he says Swartha. So Nate Vidu Swartha Gatim Hi Vishnu. So the real interest is to understand Vishnu as the supreme goal. So that that verse where Nate Vidu Swartha Gatim Hi Vishnu Durashaya He Bahirartha Manina Andayatande Rupaniyamana Ste Pisha Tandram Urudhamni Baddaha. So this was what Prahlad Maharaj talks about in terms of self-interest or real self-interest, is to understand Vishnu and then act in that understanding. So in today's verse, it's a continuation of that, where Narad Muni further clarifies that the importance of faith. So here, the word used is Srinvata Shraddhadhanasya. So executing devotional service with faith. Now, faith is a very again a very commonly loosely used word, but what Prabhupada mentions faith here is more in terms of even in Chaitanya Charitamrita we hear Shraddha Shabde Sudrida Nishchay. So basically what is that word? I think Shraddha Shabde Vishwasa Kahe Sudrida Nishchay Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hai. So this is words from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where strong faith in Krishna consciousness, what it looks like, is described. So the word Shraddha Shabda, the word Shraddha means unflinching trust in something sublime. So when one is engaged in duties of Krishna consciousness, then all other activities, sarva karma krita hai. So all other obligations are fulfilled. So that is what Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Sanatan Shiksha, I think, is describing to Sanatan Goswami about Shraddha. So here also, today's verse, Shraddha is mentioned, where Narad Muni is saying, "O best of kings, one who is faithful, who is always hearing the glories of Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who is always engaged in culture of Krishna consciousness." So, so this is important. So developing faith, the firm faith, that is like the highest level what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told, that by executing devotional service, sarva karma krita hai. So all our obligations are fulfilled by performing devotional service unto Krishna, the Supreme Lord. So again, how do we develop this faith? Because that's like the highest, and we hear all levels of faith. So we generally say loosely defined faith. It's as trust in something or someone. Now, but to achieve this highest level of faith, we need to associate with those who have that faith. So that is the process of the practice of sadhana bhakti, if you recall, which starts with Adav Shraddha. Adav Shraddha, that is sometimes described as soft faith. Some faith in that in the process, in the person giving us introducing us to the process, and also in Krishna. So with that faith, when one begins on process of devotional service, one can reach, and that is the mercy of our acharyas who have given us that conviction, and repeatedly, like Srila Prabhupada, who refers to all the acharyas in his teachings through his purports, he is giving us that conviction that by following this process, one can actually reach the highest goal, that is prema bhakti. So, how does one develop this faith? By associating with advanced devotees. When we say advanced, we hear this word advanced always. So what it really means is we need to see somebody who is, better than us in all qualities that are favorable for devotional service. And this can be seen in by observing one's activities, their how they conduct themselves, how their speech, how they live their life, whether in whichever ashram they are in, how they are going about with their day-to-day activities, how they are transcendentally situated. So these are ways to heard from senior devotees, like how to identify and try to associate with such devotees. That is the effort required to take that association of these advanced devotees. Now there is different levels of association. We say always the glories of sadhu sangha. But then to get the maximum out of that sadhu sangha, one needs to endeavor in this way to develop that, open ourselves to taking that association of advanced devotees. By developing that relationship with those devotees, developing service attitude, rendering some service, and in that way, trying to imbibe their qualities, and most important of all, trying to imbibe their faith in the process of Krishna consciousness. So that is the the way to develop firm faith. Of course, as one goes about in this process of developing faith, Krishna also reciprocates. Like we see, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I think chapter 9, most confidential knowledge, that Pratyak Savagamam Dharmyam. So, Rajavidya Rajaguyam Pavitramidam Uttamam Pratyak Savagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam. So, there, that is the reciprocation of Krishna when we endeavor to develop that faith. So he gives us, experiences in our journey where we can, our faith in the process becomes more and more deeper and stronger. And this we can see in our own lives, how Krishna has reciprocated at various instances, which has strengthened our faith, to stay with devotees, look for association of devotees, and most important of all, take shelter of the process of devotional service that is given through this Bhagavad Dharma process. So, and the corollary to this, like when one is faithful, the interest in practicing the process is there. But also there is a corollary. I mentioned 9.2. There's also 9.3 where Bhagavad Gita 9.3, Ashradadhana Purushaha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Samsara Vatmani. So here, those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, or conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. As we said earlier, nescience is that which keeps one in the realm of birth and death. And the key aspects of nescience is faithlessness. Faithlessness. So we can see how when we are doing outreach or just living in this world, interacting with people of this world, besides the devotee community, biggest thing lacking is faith. And so because of lack of faith, one is or whatever, like we heard, sarva karma krita when one executes devotional service, all other obligations are fulfilled. But when one executes activities not in Krishna consciousness, also the corollary or the opposite of it, also when we try to understand both ways, we'll see how despite doing all activities, there is no satisfaction in the world. And that is and this can be attributed to one of the attributes is faithlessness in the Supreme Lord. And so that's what I wanted to just point out, because in this purport particularly, Prabhupada says, faithless cannot accomplish this process of devotional service. And faith is created by association with devotees. Unfortunate people, even after hearing all the evidence of Vedic literature from great personalities, still have no faith in God. And so we see a lot of people like this in today's in our lives also, and in popular popular culture also, in terms of media and all. We see how lack of faith is also sometimes glorified. So I remember particular, when I was not in connection with devotees, I would read a lot of philosophy books, particularly Western philosophers also. But broadly, philosophers are always trying to remove faith in Western philosophies. I see, not generally generalizing, but what I had come across, where they are always one philosopher is always trying to remove the faith of one, so that one can put faith in their philosophy. So in the process, one becomes, when one reads multiple of this, they become faithless. And today, of course, reading also is reduced, but it is replaced with all other media, where every social media outlet, they are actually trying to people to put faith in them. In the process, people are getting bewildered and more faithless, because whom to trust? So this is what is happening, and only the medium has changed from books to social media and other ways. But in the world, more and more faithlessness is growing because of lack of course, all this is because of lack of awareness of Krishna consciousness that we know, and we need to make this available in all these mediums through these mediums to counter that faithlessness kind of culture and propaganda. Here in this verse, there is substantiation of how the process of having faith in Supreme Lord leads to all perfection. So the verse mentioned here is, of course, watering the root. And what is the root? All other, like how I said, sarva karma krita hai, like that. The all other obligations are satisfied by serving Supreme Lord. Only by watering, the analogy given is watering the root of the tree, or by feeding the stomach. Both the tree, all the parts of the tree are nourished. Similarly, all the parts of the body are also nourished by feeding the stomach. So here, again, a little continuing on the aspect of faith, Prabhupada particularly, the development of faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. So this is a very powerful statement I wanted to just highlight. Prabhupada saying, development of the faith. What faith? Of that faith that by serving, watering the root, that is by serving Supreme Lord, all other obligations are fulfilled. Now, the corollary is, if we don't serve the Supreme Lord, then our bewilderment goes on increasing. And so the divisions of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada mentions. So we'll just briefly look at this and then return to the next verses. So Prabhupada mentions 3 divisions of Krishna consciousness. So third class, again, these are divisions based on faith. So that's why I wanted to mention, because our today's verse, faith is a key aspect highlighted. So the third class men who have no faith at all, and we discussed about that a little earlier. He goes on to say, even if they're officially engaged in devotional service. It's interesting how Prabhupada uses the word officially engaged in devotional service. I'd heard of generally devotional service is glorious, but Prabhupada is cautioning that one may be officially engaged in devotional service without faith. Then he calls them that person as one with no faith. So they cannot achieve the highest perfectional stage. So most probably, it goes on to explain, most probably they will slip after some time. They may become engaged, but because they haven't complete conviction and faith, it is very difficult for them to continue in Krishna consciousness. So this is very answers many times, many questions are asked. Why is it that somebody who comes to this process understands how glorious, how it is the topmost in terms of how it helps us achieve the topmost benefit and the topmost goal, still one leaves. So this Prabhupada gives an explanation for that the slip after some time happens because of weak faith or no faith at all. So it's common in at least in India, because we feel people are coming with the same understanding as we have as preachers or as practitioners when we see somebody coming, and that is good to see it like that. But we should always try to give newcomers that faith, because for all you know, they may be coming because of just past habits at home, sentiment, or something that they might have heard, which is not necessarily given them faith in Krishna, but just that it is out of habits or some ritual. So that's where it is important to get people onto the process of devotional service or the sadhana bhakti process. Then what Prabhupada says, development of faith happens, and that is the process of Krishna consciousness. We have practical experience, Prabhupada says, activity. Some people come and apply themselves with some hidden motive, and as soon as they are economically a little well situated, they give up this process and take to their old ways again. So that's what Prabhupada is explaining. Is, that there may be some hidden motives. Here Prabhupada talks about economical, but we know there could be many other reasons why, and their immediate pressing need is satisfied. Then they go back to their old ways again. So only like it may be like a ailment, physical ailment, mental ailment, or economic challenges, the usual desires, material desires one has. If any of them gets the burning issues get resolved, which usually happens because one of the things, first things that one experiences in the process of bhakti is that some auspiciousness is created, and that auspiciousness results in some of these desires being full, or of course it's based on one's karma as well, but there is some fulfillment of their material desires, or their current situation becomes much better in terms of health or mental situation. So then one can go back to the old ways. So, but only by faith one can advance in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada is highlighting. So this Prabhupada says, again, the first class person, so we talked about the third class person with no faith or very little faith, and one who goes away, slips away soon after some things are achieved, material things are achieved. Second class are those who are not very advanced in understanding devotional scriptures, but actually have firm faith that Krishna Bhakti or service to Krishna is best course. And so in good faith have taken it up. So we can assess ourselves through this Prabhupada's elaborate description of these classes of faith. So we can see, but like they have faith in Krishna Bhakti is the best, and so they have taken it up. So thus they are superior to third class, who have neither perfect knowledge of scriptures nor good faith, but by association and simplicity are trying to follow. So Prabhupada, again, this is again, I just want to summarize this. The first class is those who have firm faith. Second class who have some soft faith and are practicing. And the third class, Prabhupada says, has no faith. So I don't want to spend more time here, but this faith, levels of faith is what I wanted to bring out. This we hear also in the Nectar of Instruction, verse 5, like the Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama classification is also factor in that classification is the level of faith. So coming back to today's verse, now how does one develop that faith? One by constantly hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord. So this is the next emphasis in today's verse. Constantly hearing, again, in the purport Prabhupada says, constant engagement in transcendental loving service of Vasudeva means constantly hearing the glories of the Lord. Now, the principles of bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So each of these limbs of bhakti, we see Shravanam is a common factor. It begins with Shravanam, and Shravanam does not stop. In fact, progressively in each of the other limbs, Shravanam and of course the other limbs preceding are integral to it. So what I mean is, like when one is doing Kirtanam, the Shravanam is included. Only when one has done proper Shravanam can one do Kirtanam. And even when we are doing Harinam Sankirtan, if you see, there is hearing also involved. It is not just chanting. Similarly, Vishnu Smaranam, when we are contemplating, remembering the Supreme Lord, it is what we have heard, we would have heard before, and when we have spoken about it, that is what leads to Smaranam. When Shravanam Kirtanam has happened properly, then Vishnu Smaranam, one can practice Smaranam. Similarly, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedam. So the same everywhere Shravanam is the preliminary and constant factor. And we can see in the lives of those who perfected their lives through each of these processes. Of course, many have perfected their lives through different limbs of this bhakti, but we commonly hear like Shravanam, Parikshit Maharaj perfected his life through Shravanam. Nice. And Kirtanam, Sukadeva Goswami, and Vishnu Smaranam is Prahlad Maharaj. So in all these cases, if you see, Shravanam is there. Sukadeva Goswami himself says in various times in the Bhagavatam that he heard from the other personalities the glories of the Lord that he is repeating. Like he heard from his father, Vasudeva himself. Yeah, and there's mention of other personalities that he heard from in the Bhagavatam, like Agastya and other great personalities. So similarly, Smaranam, like Prahlad Maharaj perfected his life through Smaranam, remembering the Supreme Lord in all, in all his, amidst all his difficult circumstances he was put under. Again, here he heard from Narad Muni himself when he was in the womb of his mother. So like that, we can see each of the personalities, like Pada Sevanam personality mentioned, perfected is Lakshmi Devi. Similar Archanam, Prithu Maharaj. Vandanam is Akrura, and Dasyam, we hear about Hanuman, and Sakyam, Arjuna, and Atmanivedanam, Bali Maharaj. So if you see all these personalities, they all had heard about the glories of the Lord. The hearing was a common factor. That's what I wanted to just highlight, because that's why Prabhupada is mentioning that the 9 limbs here are the only means by which perfection can be attained, and simply by hearing of the glories of the Lord, one is elevated to the transcendental position. So hearing, the process of hearing is highlighted here. So going to the next verse, these 2 verses combined, just chant the verse. Yatra Bhagavata Rajan Sadhavo Vishadashrayah Bhagavat Gunanukatana Shravana Vyagra Chetasa Tasmin Mahamukharita Madhubi Charitra Piyusha Shesha Sharitaha Parita Shravanti Maye Pibanti Vitrusho Nrupagada Karnes Tanna Sprishanti Ashana Bhaya Shoka Mohaha. So translation, my dear king, in the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations, and thus purely conscious and engaged with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that place, if one gets a chance to hear their constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like the waves of a river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become immune to all kinds of fear, lamentation, and illusion. Here, it's a long purport. We'll just discuss the purport as we are going. But basically, in this verse, these 2 verses, Prabhupada is emphasizing actually the sajjana or sadhavo vishadasya. So the importance of living with sadhus. So in the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations, and thus purely conscious and engaged in great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in that place, one, one forgets the necessities of life. So continuing on the um, topic of faith, here what that faith leads to is this desire to live in the community of devotees. So we can see even in ISKCON, when one his faith is growing, it becomes very obvious that the ideal situation for one, particularly grahasthas and vanaprasthas, is to um, situate themselves in close to association of devotees. If not, even Prabhupada, if you see in the early days, there was no kind of big support systems like we have today. So he emphasized living in the temple. Even grahasthas were living in the temple. They're moving into the temple. And we see a later stage, after a decade or so, there was they moved out and started living in communities. But if you see, although there may have been many challenges in materially and of course in terms of other circumstances, but the benefit of living in the close association with devotees was achieved by all those who lived in the temples. Similarly, those because there was always constantly engaged in the practice of Krishna consciousness. So what we heard in the previous verse was practiced, and Prabhupada kept that engagement. We see, when we see being fully engaged, Prabhupada, practically demonstrated it. There was no moment that any devotees were not in some service, right from morning till evening. We have heard of devotees going after morning program and prasadam for some service, like the book distribution, and staying all day and till late in the evening and coming back. So that's just one example like that. Many services, the one was engaged. So that is, of course, the early days of ISKCON. But even now, if you see flourishing ISKCON communities, we see common thing is a nice facilities for chanting and hearing. And this attracts sincere souls, with the deep, who are cultivating their faith towards that community. So that's here, this purport, Prabhupada is saying cultivation of Krishna consciousness is possible where great devotees live together and constantly engage in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. So here Prabhupada mentions about the benefit of living like in Vrindavan. There are many devotees constantly engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord and hearing. So in such place, when one gets to constantly hear from pure devotees, then the cultivation of Krishna consciousness becomes very easy. So this we can see in our lives also. We may not have been in Vrindavan, but wherever there is a chance for regular hearing, the glories of the Lord, there cultivation becomes very easy. And even in our own lives, we can see when we started, there was some environment where these factors were in place. Like there was association of devotees and opportunities to regularly hear the glories of the Lord and glories of the Lord's devotees. So that shows how the process works, because that made us develop more and more taste and more faith in the process, and take up more and more commitments to the practice of bhakti. So here Prabhupada further mentions that of course this verse, one is about living with devotees and how practicing devotional service of starting with chanting and hearing in the association of devotees, one forgets the necessities of like hunger, thirst, and also immune to all kinds of fear, lamentation, and illusion. So this is what we always suffer from. The suffering in this world, if you see, can be attributed to this. Where there is a fear, fear of the unknown, fear of what may happen, and lamentation of something that has happened, and also acting in illusion. So all these, this is like the kind of Narad Muni is giving Prachinabari, King Prachinabari, the benefits, kind of pushing him to what all you will achieve, and like you will achieve, immunity from all these fear, lamentation, and illusion, and forgetting necessities of life. Because this is what, if you see, the world around us is going around. World is going around for fulfilling these necessities and for overcoming these kinds of difficulties or suffering, because people don't have time. Always, if we see when we do outreach books, people are always rushing, and we can see in practically when we reach out to anybody, even in old age, people are rushing because they have fear, lamentation, and illusion, and also they are they feel the necessities of life have to be fulfilled, and that takes up all their consciousness and particularly time. So we can see, but in the association of devotees, we are freed from these type of illusions and pressures, if you see, because otherwise there is always pressure from the world around us. We are bombarded with so many things that we need to do, which are not necessary, like Prabhupada calls unnecessary necessities. So if we are living in a community of devotees, then these type of unwanted necessities will not drag us away, because in pursuit of fulfilling those necessities, one may completely slip in the process, and they may forget what is more important. Like we said, what is the real interest? So this can happen. That's where it's important, even in the community of devotees, that we try to keep developing focus on improving our faith and in deepening our practice of devotional service. Otherwise, we can also kind of slip. So there is no standing still, as they say in Krishna consciousness. So even in communities, we just apply it. There's no standing still for okay, we achieved these type of things, so there needs to be a constant endeavor to keep raising our level of practice, and how we can improve the community as a place for strengthening one's faith. Otherwise, it's easy to fall back into the material consciousness, where what we see in any other kind of situation, where everybody is just focused on peer pressure, keeping up with the neighbors in terms of material achievements, peers at office, all these typical material goals can easily overtake our consciousness. So that's what it's kind of Narad Muni is giving the push for living with devotees. So here Prabhupada Prabhupada in the highlights the word Bhagavat Gunanukatana Shravana Vyagra Chetasa. So Shravana Vyagra is interesting. So one needs to be eager for hearing. eager to find the place where glories of the Lord are being heard and chanted. Is significant in this verse. So, like Prabhupada gives the analogy of a businessman is always very eager to go to a place where business is transacted. So, similarly, a devotee, so we see this businessman analogy, we see it all around us. Like, although business can be conducted anywhere, there are areas where, like, it is more the ecosystem, as they call it. The environment is more conducive for business to flourish. So we say even like in our cities, there are sections of the cities where all the businesses are concentrated, because those in business will know what is the support system needed to stay in that business consciousness and to grow business. So similarly, like we see, we always hear Bangalore. Anywhere people could have done startups, but they say they come to Bangalore for startups because the ecosystem is favorable for startups. Just an analogy. Similarly, here Prabhupada is mentioning devotees very eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. So, the same way, devotees should be eager to find that ecosystem where all aspects of cultivating one's faith in and deepening the practice of devotional service is enhanced. In such a place is what one should seek out, and to grow one's real business, that is real interest of developing our relationship with Krishna and acting in that relationship. So this is Prabhupada mentions in the purport, and another confirmation verse. He quotes from Bhagavatam. It's very popular, famous verse. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavantirat karna rasayana kataha tajjoshana dasva apavargavatmani shraddharatir bhaktir anukramishyati. So in the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and to the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotional service begins. So this, my spiritual master always mentions this, like, so it's a very humbling verse also, because sometimes we are there's tendency to say we are practicing devotional service, but this gives us a check, like when real devotional service begins, devotional service begins, that when all these things are in place, the association of devotees, the discussion of pastimes, activities, supreme, very pleasing. Now, by cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter his freed and his attraction becomes fixed. So, when all these happen, then devotional service begins, is what this verse is highlighting. So, an important aspect here is hearing about the and hearing and discussion about the glories of the Lord. So here, one other key point in this verse is the secret of success in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness is hearing from the right person. So a Krishna conscious person is never disturbed by the bodily necessities. So these two, Prabhupada concludes by kind of summarizing the gist of the verse. So hearing from the right person. So right person in the sense one who is speaking in line with Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, because that is the potency of the parampara and the scriptures is there when one is speaking in line with Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. And of course, and one who's speaking if is sincerely practicing devotional service and trying to advance, then we should try to hear from such a person. So then we also will be able to imbibe that same mood and grow in our Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada concludes that not being disturbed by bodily necessities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending is possible when one is Krishna conscious. So that is that's what we heard earlier about Narad Muni is highlighting the glory of the practicing the devotees. So the last verse for today, and we have short time, but it is related. So we talked about, so quickly I'll chant the sloka and the translation. एतेरुपद्रुतो नित्यं जीवलोका स्वभावजय न करोति हरे नूनं कथामृता निदौ Translation: because the conditioned soul is always disturbed by the bodily necessities such as hunger and thirst, he has very little time to cultivate attachment to hearing the nectarian words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, purport, Prabhupada talks about Nirjana Bhajan. So, unless one is associated with devotees, he cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. So, this verse is kind of talking about the corollary to the previous verse. The previous verse was the benefits and what one gains by being closely associated in the community of devotees. And here he talks about the opposite. So if one is not associated with devotees, he cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. He calls it, the word used is Nirjana Bhajan. So cultivating Krishna consciousness in a solitary place is not possible, particularly for the neophyte, because in the neophyte stage, it's very easy to be disturbed by the bodily necessities, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So that is why, but always it is important, sadhu sangha. Even at a higher stage, it is highlighted that the importance of sadhu sangha, but particularly in the early stage, there is no compromise on sadhu sangha, because otherwise it leads to easily slipping away, because like we mentioned earlier, the whole world is going about fulfilling these basic needs of sleeping, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And when our consciousness is raised to a higher purpose beyond these bodily necessities, when we are in the association of devotees, we practice constant hearing and chanting. And when one tries to do that, independently or in a solitary manner, it's very easy to slip away. We see in our own lives when we are we realize the benefit of sadhu sangha when we circumstances take us away from it, like we have to go to another place on work or for some family obligations and all, and we are placed in situations where we don't have we may be able to hear and chant, but not in the association of devotees. That is when we realize how our bodily demands are we are kind of challenged, take more precedence. So, and we are humbled actually by such instances where we realize that we cannot do it on our own. So a good devotee realizes this, and tries to minimize occurrences of such circumstances which lead to being away from devotees for a long time. And this helps. See, all this is very practical, because in all our decisions, we hear from seniors that try to make all your life decisions so that you are not away from association. Because if you look at it in isolation, it may seem, or in early stages, we may not realize the benefit. But here, Narad Muni is kind of elaborating on both sides. What is the benefit of staying with devotees, and what happens when we are, kind of away from it, nirjana. So if we can say, the previous verse is kind of sajjana bhajan, and here it is nirjana bhajan. So the effect of sadhu sangha and the effect of being away from sadhu sangha are kind of highlighted in these two verses. And another important thing in this verse is, we therefore see, so the devotees known as sahajiyas, who make everything very easy, do not associate with advanced devotees. So this is another precaution, and Prabhupada is giving in this purport, that when in practice there could be sahajya tendencies. Sahajya means kind of some sort of casualness introduced into practice of um, devotional activities, where one is so Prabhupada says such persons in the name of devotional activities are addicted to all kinds of sinful acts, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. So there are so many devotees, so-called devotees, passing themselves off as devotees while engaging in these sinful activities. So Prabhupada is cautioning about this sahajya mentality, because when one is away from devotees, this can creep up. And also, we can, how it creeps up is not like typically we hear about historically the sahajya groups, how they externally express their devotion and all those aspects. But if we introspect, sahajya tendencies can be creeping up in our own, in our own consciousness. So that is what I see Prabhupada's cautioning here. It may not be as expressed here as addicted to sinful acts like illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. But on a more subtle level, like here Prabhupada is saying, make everything very easy. So this is what I kind of took as a caution by Prabhupada. When we try to make our lives very easy in Krishna consciousness, of course, we should make our lives, material life, simple so that and easy, so that we don't have to strive hard for our material obligations. But in the practice of devotional service, we should not try to make it easy. Like in whatever service we are doing, we can see, or in our devotional practice, if we take it easy, then that is a kind of a sahajya tendency creeping in, and we should also not associate with. And when that casualness or easygoingness creeps in, how that manifests also, probably we can see, because then we do not associate with advanced devotees. So, a very practical explanation here. We see sometimes this tendency to avoid certain devotees because they are very strong and they can be very, they really purify us quickly by highlighting our shortcomings. We try to avoid associating with, when I say we, I say when we have this sahajya tendency, we will tend to avoid that association of advanced devotees. So that is the precaution. All these things are sahajya tendencies, like Prabhupada is highlighting. So we reached the hour, and that's those were some things that I wanted to highlight in these 4 verses today. So I thank all the devotees for your patient hearing, and please forgive me for anything I have spoken out of my realization. And please correct me if there's anything wrong I have said, and I look forward to some discussions.
Hare Krishna, Venugopal Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for a nice presentation. And I think 2 factors that you emphasized, the faith, right? We all started the journey of Krishna consciousness, little faith, Adav Shraddha. And then you also mentioned out that development of faith is actually Krishna consciousness, and how we can develop the faith. We can actually develop the faith by hearing the glorification of the Lord from the pure devotees. That actually helps in developing the faith. And also you mentioned how important it is to stay in the association of devotees, and one cannot practice Krishna consciousness in seclusion. That's very, very important, especially for neophyte devotees or practicing sadhakas. It was very important. And also you mentioned about the Sahaja devotees or Sahaja mentality rather than Sahaja devotees. I think the Sahaja mentality will creep in gradually if you don't, take the devotion life seriously, and if you don't take the association of advanced devotees. Oh, thank you very much, Prabhuji. These are all the important points, and at least I need to reflect back whether the Sahaja mentality is creeping in me, or I should stay cautious. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. The devotees can unmute their line and share their comments or reflections or any questions.
So, Prabhu, you had a question. Was that answered?
No, Prabhuji. I just wanted to ask after all the other devotees have asked the question. If nobody's asking, you can take my question, Prabhu.
So the question is, when we say lack of faith, does that mean lack of complete absolute faith? Conditioned soul's faith sometimes is not absolute. How to understand this lack of faith? Yeah. So Prabhupada, in terms of the degrees of faith as that, and conditioned soul is not definitely not absolute. When you say absolute, that firm faith, that Drida Shraddha, Prabhupada describes that as that acting in Krishna consciousness, that Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, where you water the root. So that acting in that consciousness is the highest level at the absolute level. But all other reaching that level is the journey of practice of Krishna consciousness. And from the conditioned soul in the conditioned state to this state of complete completely acting in Krishna consciousness, really. So does it mean lack of complete absolute faith? So again, it's not, again the degrees. So wherever we are, lack of faith. So it can be it's like for somebody to just hear about Krishna. It's not about the absolute faith. It is just that there could be lack of faith in something higher. So different degrees of faith. So that's what I meant by lack of faith. That developing the faith at every level is what is the process. And when we say faithless, it can be loosely termed that there's no faith in something beyond material. Yeah, but I just wanted to understand the background. Like when you say conditioned soul faith is sometimes not absolute. So that is fine, Prabhu, because we are not expecting one to start on the process with absolute faith. Is like it said, Adav Shraddha. It's called soft faith. We are not expecting absolute faith to begin the process of Krishna consciousness. So that's my understanding, Prabhu. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. I think faith refers to varying degrees of faith, and if we are in this level, gradually we should go to the next level. So yeah, understand, Prabhu. Yeah, thank you. Other devotees may
Anybody
please
else
unmute.
wants to contribute? Mention any reflections, please. Please do so.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it was very nice to listen about the faith and also the importance of the association with the pure devotees. That point is very nice, but about the Sahajayas, didn't get much, Prabhu.
So, Sahajayas, if you see the Mataji, Prabhupada uses that. Therefore, see the devotees known as Sahajayas who make everything very easy, do not associate with advanced devotees. So it's more like historically also, if you see what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did as to read the parampara of the Sahajiya practices. So that we have heard that Sahajiya word in that context, where a lot of illicit activities were being done in the name of bhakti. So that is again what is kind of like Prabhupada is mentioning, when this easygoing attitude creeps into the practice of bhakti, then one can all those things are justified. Oh, the illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, all this was being practiced by so-called devotees at the time, historically also, and even now we see in many places. That is why spiritualists or spirituality gets a bad name because of the Sahajiya type of practitioners, who in the name of externally and also in some of their practices, it may seem very spiritual, but they are very easygoing in their sadhana, in their strictness with themselves, and restricting themselves to from all these sinful acts. So that is what Prabhupada is cautioning, that if you are not in association of devotees, these Sahajiya tendencies can come creep in, because we have got the highest truth, and then we don't have the association of devotees who can caution us of anything that we are slipping away from. So then what happens? You and your mind, and you have the highest process. So you may introduce all sorts of concoctions and say this is also, and this is also bhakti, and that is how historically this Sahajiya groups have kind of developed, and a lot of damage has been done to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's parampara and the process and the movement by these type of practices in the past. And that's what we know Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and then Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, through their literatures and their strong efforts in preaching and propagating, they cleansed that marga, bhakti marga, from these Sahajiya tendencies, and gave us kind of the purest practices. So we need, so that's what Sahajiya tendencies mean, Mataji. I hope that answers. Any particular thing that you are looking clarification?
No, Prabhu. Actually, I was just thinking how that affects the Sahajiya, this thing. I mean, my knowledge about Sahajiya is very, very limited. Like, I used to think Sahajiya means they dress like Radharani, and they call them.
Yes.
Yeah, like that.
No, what Prabhupada is saying is how one becomes develops Sahajiya type tendencies. Like I need not dress like that, and only then I become a Sahajiya. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. Like we have heard of Sahajiya more in that context. Like one is become Gopi Bhav and externally displaying these type of symptoms of highest level of devotion. That is one aspect, but really Sahajiya, that is kind of the most degraded level of manifestation of Sahajiyaness, we can say. But Prabhupada here is telling how it starts. Sahajiya tendency, how it starts is by taking it easy. And when we take easy, like when we try make everything easy, then we avoid all the strictness, and slowly we slip away, and it leads to that level of, because we have the highest knowledge and we know Gopi Bhav is highest, and also we kind of concoct everything, and it can lead to that how you mentioned this dressing and all that. Those are external manifestations of that, which started with taking things easy in the practice of devotional service. So that is what Prabhupada is cautioning. The first step towards Sahajiya-ness, you can say.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Dandot Pranam.
Thank you. I think we have time. Any other questions or comments?
There is a comment from Gaurchandra Gopinath Prabhu. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class, and staying in association is very important for progress in spiritual life. That was Prabhuji's comment.
Thank you, Prabhu. And thank you for all the Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya devotees and giving us the opportunity to daily associate with devotees like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think devotees, there are no questions. We can end today's sessions with Vaishnava Pranam. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namata Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna devotees, I will end the Zoom session now. Hare Krishna.